What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors walks into the lion's den of daytime television and refuses to back down from his principles? What happens when a seasoned talk show host pushes too far and meets someone who won't be intimidated? Today, we're diving into the explosive confrontation that shocked viewers and left the entire studio in stunned silence. This is the story of how Denzel Washington got kicked off The View after a heated argument with Joy Behar that nobody saw coming. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think about celebrities standing up for their beliefs on live television. Now, let's get into what really happened that day. The atmosphere in the View studio was electric. As Denzel Washington walked onto the set, the audience erupted in applause. Clearly thrilled to see the Academy Award-winning actor, he moved with his usual confident stride, that trademark smile lighting up his face as he waved to the crowd. But what nobody knew was that this appearance would become one of the most controversial moments in the show's history. Welcome back to The View. I'm Joy Behar, and we're here with the incredible Denzel Washington, Joy announced, her voice dripping with a kind of artificial sweetness that regular viewers knew masked something sharper underneath. Denzel, thank you so much for being here with us today. Thank you for having me, Joy, Denzel replied, settling into his chair with that easy grace that had made him a movie star. Always a pleasure. The other hosts, Whoopi Goldberg, Sarah Haynes, and Sunony host, all smiled and nodded, clearly excited to have such a prestigious guest. But Joy had other plans brewing behind those calculating eyes. So Denzel, you've been in Hollywood for decades now, and you've always been very vocal about your faith and your values. Joy began, her tone already shifting into something more pointed. But don't you think some of those traditional values might be a little outdated in today's world? Denzel's eyebrows raised slightly. This wasn't the typical softball question guests usually got right out of the gate. I'm not sure what you mean by outdated, Joy. Could you be more specific? Well, you know, your views on family, on marriage, on the way society should be structured, Joy pressed, leaning forward with that predatory gleam in her eyes that regular viewers knew meant trouble. Don't you think it's time to evolve with the times? The studio audience shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the light promotional interview they'd expected. Denzel, however, remained perfectly composed, his years of experience in high-pressure situations serving him well. Joy, I believe in timeless principles, he said calmly. I believe in treating people with respect, in the importance of family, in working hard and taking responsibility for your actions. I don't think those values have an expiration date, but surely you can see how some of your more conservative viewpoints might be problematic. Joy shot back, her voice taking on that sharp edge that made even her co-hosts glance nervously at each other. Especially when it comes to issues of social justice and equality. I'm very much in favor of equality, Denzel replied, his voice still measured, but with a slight hardening around the edges. I believe every person deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. But I also believe in personal responsibility and the importance of strong communities. Joy's eyes narrowed. She clearly wasn't getting the reaction she wanted. That's interesting because some people might say that your success in Hollywood has made you forget where you came from, that you've become disconnected from the struggles of ordinary people. The accusation hung in the air like a thunderclap. The audience went dead silent. Even the other hosts looked shocked at the brazen attack. Denzel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but when he spoke, his voice remained controlled. Joy, I grew up in Mount Vernon, New York. My father was a minister. My mother worked multiple jobs to support our family. I've never forgotten where I came from, and I've never forgotten the values that got me here. Success doesn't change who you are at your core, it just reveals it. But surely you can admit that your wealth and status have given you a certain privilege that maybe makes it harder to relate to people who are struggling. Joy continued, clearly not willing to back down. Don't you think that makes some of your opinions a little tone-deaf? I think what's tone-deaf is assuming that success somehow invalidates someone's right to have principles. Denzel fired back, his famous composure beginning to crack just slightly. I've worked hard for everything I have, and I've tried to use my platform to help others. But I won't apologize for believing in the values that made that success possible. The tension in the studio was palpable now. The other hosts were looking back and forth between Joy and Denzel like spectators at a tennis match. Whoopi in particular seemed to be trying to signal Joy to back off, but Joy was in full attack mode. Now E.T. Faith, Joy said, her voice dripping with condescension, you've been very open about being a Christian. Don't you think some of the more traditional Christian teachings are harmful to certain communities? I think the core message of Christianity, love your neighbor as yourself, is about as far from harmful as you can get, Denzel replied, his voice gaining strength. But I also think people who twist that message to justify hate or discrimination are missing the point entirely. But what about the parts of Christianity that some people find exclusive or judgmental? Joy pressed, don't you think it's problematic to hold on to beliefs that might make other people feel unwelcome or unwanted? Denzel leaned back in his chair, studying Joy with those intense eyes that had captivated audiences for decades. Joy, are you really asking me to defend my faith on national television? Because I'm starting to get the feeling this isn't really about my new movie. I'm asking you to examine whether some of your beliefs might be out of step with modern society. Joy replied, her voice taking on an even sharper edge. Whether maybe it's time to consider that some of the things you believe might actually be harmful to people. The studio fell silent again. This was no longer a celebrity interview. This was a confrontation, and everyone in the room could feel it. Denzel's eyes hardened, and when he spoke, his voice carried a quiet intensity that made everyone lean forward. Joy, I've been in this business for a long time, and I've been interviewed by some of the toughest people in media. But I've never had someone sit across from me and essentially call my faith harmful. I've never had someone suggest that my beliefs that have guided me through my entire life and career, are somehow toxic. I'm not calling your faith toxic, Joy said, though her tone suggested otherwise. I'm simply asking you to consider whether some traditional viewpoints might need to be updated for the modern world. And I'm telling you that some things don't need to be updated. Denzel replied, his voice growing stronger. Some things are true regardless of what year it is or what's popular in society at the moment. Joy's face was beginning to flush slightly, a sure sign that she was getting frustrated. But don't you think that kind of rigid thinking is exactly what's wrong with our society? Don't you think we need to be more flexible, more willing to change? I think we need to be more willing to stand up for what's right, even when it's unpopular. Denzel shot back. I think we need to stop letting other people tell us what we should believe and start having the courage to live by our convictions. The exchange was becoming more heated by the second, and the other hosts were clearly becoming uncomfortable. Whoopi tried to jump in with a joke to lighten the mood, but Joy wasn't having it. Denzel, with all due respect, that sounds like the kind of thinking that's led to a lot of division in our country, Joy said, her voice now openly confrontational. Maybe it's time to consider that some of your strongly held beliefs might actually be part of the problem. That was the moment everything changed. Denzel's eyes flashed with something that made everyone in the studio sit up straighter. When he spoke, his voice was deadly quiet, but carried the weight of absolute conviction. Joy, I've sat here patiently, while you've questioned my values, my faith, my connection to my community, and my right to believe what I believe. But I'm not going to sit here and let you tell me that my beliefs are the problem with America. The silence that followed Denzel's words was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop in that studio. Joy's face went through several different expressions. Shock, anger, defiance, before settling on something that looked like barely controlled fury. Denzel, I think you're being a little sensitive here, Joy said, her voice dripping with condescension. I'm simply trying to have an honest conversation about how some traditional viewpoints might not serve us well in modern society. Sensitive, Denzel repeated, his voice rising slightly for the first time. Joy, you've spent the last 10 minutes systematically attacking everything I believe in. You've questioned my faith, my values, my connection to my community. And now, you're telling me I'm being sensitive for not just sitting here and taking it. The other hosts were frozen in their seats. Whoopi kept glancing at the producers off camera, clearly hoping someone would step in. Sarah Haynes looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. Sunny host was staring at Joy with obvious concern. I'm not attacking anything, Joy insisted, though her tone suggested otherwise. I'm asking legitimate questions about whether some of your beliefs might be harmful to certain communities. That's called journalism. Denzel, no Joy. That's called an agenda, Denzel fired back, his composure finally starting to crack. Real journalism would involve asking about my work, my projects, my experiences. What you're doing is trying to tear down my faith and my values on national television. Joy's eyes flashed with anger. I have every right to ask tough questions. That's what we do here at The View. We don't just give celebrities a platform to promote their projects without examining their beliefs and their impact on society. And I have every right to defend my beliefs when they're being unfairly attacked. Denzel responded, his voice gaining power. But what I won't do is sit here and pretend that your questions are coming from a place of genuine curiosity rather than hostility. The tension was becoming unbearable. The studio audience was completely silent, watching this confrontation unfold with a mixture of fascination and horror. This was not the Denzel Washington they were used to seeing, the calm, collected movie star. This was a man who had been pushed too far. Hostility, Joy laughed, but it was a harsh, bitter sound. Denzel, I think you need to develop a thicker skin. If you can't handle having your beliefs questioned, maybe you shouldn't be in the public eye. That was the moment Denzel's famous composure finally snapped. He leaned forward in his chair, his eyes blazing with an intensity that made everyone in the studio lean back instinctively. Joy, let me tell you something about having a thick skin, he said, his voice low and dangerous. I've been in this business for over 30 years. I've dealt with racism. I've dealt with tipcasting. I've dealt with people trying to tear me down because of my success, but I've never had someone sit across from me and attack my faith with such obvious contempt. I'm not attacking your faith, Joy protested, but her voice was wavering. Now, I'm simply pointing out that some religious beliefs can be problematic in modern society. You're doing exactly what you just accused me of doing, Denzel shot back. You're being sensitive. You're being defensive. The difference is, I'm not trying to tear down your beliefs. I'm not sitting here questioning your right to believe what you believe. Joy's face was getting redder by the second. My beliefs don't hurt other people, Denzel. My beliefs don't exclude people or make them feel unwelcome, and neither do mine, Denzel replied firmly. My faith teaches me to love my neighbor, to help those in need, to treat everyone with dignity and respect. If that's problematic to you, then maybe the problem isn't with my beliefs. The other hosts were clearly panicking now. Whoopi finally tried to jump in. Okay, let's all take a breath here and maybe talk about something else. But Joy wasn't done. Whoopi, I think this is an important conversation. Denzel, you say your faith teaches you to love your neighbor. But what about the parts of Christianity that some people find exclusive or judgmental? What about the people who feel hurt by traditional Christian teachings? Denzel stared at her for a long moment, his jaw working as he clearly struggled to maintain his composure. Joy, are you seriously asking me to defend the entire Christian faith on your show? Are you asking me to answer for every person who has ever twisted the message of love into something hateful? I am asking you to acknowledge that some of your beliefs might not be as loving as you think they are. Joy replied, her voice sharp with challenge. And I'm telling you that you don't get to decide what's loving and what isn't. Denzel fired back. You don't get to sit there and judge my faith, based on your own prejudices and assumptions. The word prejudices hung in the air like a bomb. Joy's face went white, then red, then white again. Are you calling me prejudiced, Denzel? I'm calling you exactly what you are, Denzel replied, his voice steady now, but filled with quiet fury. Someone who has decided that faith is the enemy, that traditional values are somehow toxic, and that anyone who believes differently than you is part of the problem. Joy stood up. Abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I am not prejudiced against religion. I simply believe that some religious beliefs need to be examined and questioned, especially when they impact public policy and social issues. Then examine them with respect, Denzel said, standing up as well. Question them with genuine curiosity, not with contempt and hostility. But don't sit there and tell me that my faith, the foundation of my entire life, is somehow harmful to society. Maybe it is, Joy shot back, her voice rising to match his. Maybe some of these traditional beliefs are exactly what's keeping us from progress. Maybe it's time to admit that some of the old ways of thinking are doing more harm than good. The studio erupted in gasps. Even the other hosts looked shocked at Joy's boldness. Denzel stared at her for a long moment, his eyes blazing with an intensity that made everyone in the room uncomfortable. Joy, I've tried to be respectful here, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. I've tried to have a civilized conversation, despite your obvious agenda, but I'm not going to stand here and let you tell me that my faith is harmful to society. Then maybe you should leave, Joy said, her voice shaking with anger. Maybe if you can't handle having your beliefs challenged, you shouldn't be here. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Denzel looked at her for a long moment, then glanced at the other hosts who were staring at Joy in obvious shock. When he spoke, his voice was calm again, but there was something final in his tone. Joy, I've been challenged by much tougher people than you. I've been questioned by much smarter people than you, but I've never been disrespected by someone who claims to be a journalist in the way you've disrespected me today. I haven't disrespected you, Joy protested, but her voice was losing its power. I've asked legitimate questions about your beliefs and their impact on society. No, you've attacked my faith with obvious contempt and then tried to justify it as journalism, Denzel replied. There's a difference between asking tough questions and trying to tear someone down, and you've clearly chosen the latter. Joy's face was flushed with anger and embarrassment. The other hosts were looking at her with obvious concern, clearly realizing that she had gone too far. The studio audience was completely silent, watching this confrontation with rapt attention. I think we need to take a commercial break, Whoopi said desperately, but Joy waved her off. No, let's finish this conversation, Joy said, her voice shaking with fury. Denzel, if you can't handle having your beliefs questioned, then maybe you're not as strong in your faith as you think you are. That was the final straw. Denzel's eyes flashed with something that made everyone in the studio step back. When he spoke, his voice was deadly quiet, but carried the weight of absolute conviction. Joy, let me tell you something about strength of faith, Denzel said, his voice cutting through the studio like a blade. My faith has carried me through poverty, through racism, through every challenge this industry has thrown at me. It's taught me to love people even when they don't love me back. It's taught me to forgive people even when they attack what I hold most dear. But what it hasn't taught me is to sit silently while someone tries to tear down everything I believe in, under the guise of journalism. Joy's face was a mask of barely controlled rage. Denzel, I think you're being incredibly dramatic here. I'm simply asking you to consider that some of your beliefs might be outdated, and I'm telling you that you don't get to decide what's outdated. Denzel replied, his voice gaining power with each word. You don't get to sit there in your position of privilege and tell me that the values that built this country, that built strong communities, that built strong families, are somehow toxic. Those same values were used to justify slavery, to justify segregation, to justify keeping women from voting. Joy shot back, her voice rising. So, yes, maybe some of them are toxic. The studio went dead silent. Even the camera operators stopped moving. This was no longer a heated discussion. This was a full-blown confrontation, and everyone could feel it spiraling out of control. Denzel's eyes hardened to steel. Joy, are you seriously comparing my faith to slavery? Are you seriously suggesting that believing in God, in family, in personal responsibility is somehow equivalent to the evils of our past? I'm saying that people have used religion to justify terrible things throughout history. Joy replied, her voice shaking with emotion. And maybe it's time to acknowledge that some of these traditional beliefs have been used to hurt people, and people have used atheism to justify terrible things. 2. Denzel fired back. People have used politics to justify terrible things. People have used science to justify terrible things. By your logic, we should abandon everything because someone somewhere has twisted it for evil purposes. Joy's face was getting redder by the second. That's not what I'm saying, and you know it. Then what are you saying, Joy? Denzel demanded, standing up and taking a step toward her, because for the last 15 minutes, you've done nothing but attack my faith, my values, and my right to believe what I believe. So tell me, what exactly is your point here? My point is that maybe some of your beliefs are harmful to people, Joy said, also standing up, her voice reaching a near shout. Maybe some of the things you believe are keeping us from progress. Maybe it's time to admit that some of the old ways of thinking need to die. The word die echoed through the studio like a gunshot. Denzel stared at her for a long moment, his face a mask of controlled fury. When he spoke, his voice was so quiet that everyone had to lean forward to hear him. Joy, you just told me that my faith needs to die. You just told me that the beliefs that have guided me through my entire life, that have made me who I am, need to die. Do you understand what you just said? Joy's face went white as she realized what she had just said. I didn't mean it like that. I meant that some outdated thinking needs to be left behind. No, you meant exactly what you said, Denzel replied, his voice growing stronger. You want my faith to die, you want my values to die. You want everything I stand for to die. And you have the audacity to call that journalism. The other hosts were frantically trying to signal the producers to cut to commercial, but Joy was beyond saving now. Denzel, you're twisting my words. I'm repeating your words. Denzel shot back. You said my beliefs need to die. You said the values that have sustained me and millions of other people need to die. And you said it with such contempt, such hatred that everyone in this studio could feel it. Joy's composure was completely gone now. I don't hate you, Denzel. I just think some of your beliefs are problematic. You don't hate me, but you hate what I believe. Denzel replied. You don't hate me, but you want my faith to die. You don't hate me, but you think everything I stand for is toxic. Do you see the problem with that logic? The studio audience was completely captivated now. This wasn't just a celebrity interview gone wrong. This was a philosophical battle being fought on live television, and Denzel was winning. I think we really need to take a break, Whoopi said desperately. But Joy waved her off again. No, let's finish this, Joy said, her voice shaking with anger and embarrassment. Denzel, if you can't handle having your beliefs questioned, then maybe you shouldn't be in the public eye. I can handle having my beliefs questioned, Denzel replied, his voice now calm, but filled with quiet power. What I can't handle is having them attacked with such obvious contempt and hatred. What I can't handle is being told that my faith needs to die by someone who claims to be a journalist. I am a journalist, Joy protested weakly. No, you're an activist, Denzel replied. A journalist would ask tough questions with respect and genuine curiosity. An activist attacks beliefs they disagree with and tries to tear them down. And that's exactly what you've been doing since I sat down. Joy's face was a mixture of rage and humiliation. I have every right to challenge beliefs that I think are harmful. And I have every right to defend beliefs that you think are harmful. Denzel fired back, but what you don't have the right to do is sit there and tell me that my faith, the foundation of my entire life, needs to die. The confrontation was reaching a breaking point. Joy looked around the studio, clearly realizing that she had lost control of the situation. The other hosts were staring at her with obvious concern. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. I think this interview is over, Joy said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I think you're right, Denzel replied, his voice strong and clear. But let me be clear about something. Joy, I came here today to talk about my work, to connect with your audience, to share my experiences. But you decided to turn this into an attack on my faith and my values. I didn't attack anything, Joy protested one last time. You told me my beliefs need to die, Denzel said, his voice cutting through her protests. You called my faith problematic. You suggested that my values are toxic. If that's not an attack, then I don't know what is. Joy's face was flushed with anger and embarrassment. I think you need to leave. I think you're right, Denzel replied, already moving toward the exit. But I want everyone watching to understand what just happened here. I was invited on this show as a guest, and I was attacked for my faith and my values by someone who claims to be a journalist. The studio was completely silent as Denzel walked toward the exit. Just before he reached the door, he turned back to face the cameras, to everyone watching who shares my faith, who believes in traditional values, who thinks that some things are worth standing up for. Don't let anyone tell you that your beliefs need to die. Don't let anyone tell you that your faith is toxic. And don't let anyone tell you that you have to apologize for believing in something greater than yourself. With that, Denzel Washington walked off the set of The View, leaving behind a stunned studio and a host who had clearly bitten off more than she could chew. The cameras kept rolling as Joy stood there, her face a mask of fury and humiliation. Realizing that she had just been schooled by one of Hollywood's most respected actors, the silence that followed was deafening. Even Whoopi, known for her quick wit and ability to handle any situation, seemed at a loss for words. The other hosts looked like they wanted to disappear into their chairs. And Joy, the woman who had started this entire confrontation, stood there realizing that she had just made a terrible mistake. That's the story of how Denzel Washington got kicked off The View after refusing to back down from his principles. A man who had built his entire career on dignity and respect, who had never been involved in public controversies, had finally reached his breaking point when someone attacked the very foundation of his beliefs. What do you think about celebrities standing up for their beliefs even when it's controversial? Should Denzel have just sat there and taken it? Or was he right to defend his faith so forcefully? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories like this.